Buckner's headquarters. Of the three senior officers, Buckner, Pillow, and Floyd, he's the first to arrive here. And he establishes his headquarters in the Dover Hotel. Pillow's headquarters are in the Rice House, which would be between us and Spring Street, next to the building that was torn down in late 1970s, and Floyd is the last to arrive here. He doesn't arrive here till the morning of the 13th, and he may have been here with Buckner, and he may have been up with Pillow. Now, the Confederates, when they form up on the morning of the 15th to make their attack, the Confederates are going to mass all their troops except for the 49th and the 50th Tennessee, which are in the enclosed work at Fort Donelson. The men manning the water batteries, and the 30th Tennessee, which will occupy the rest of the earthworks, occupied by John Calvin Brown, who commands Buckner's other division. Now, Buckner, with John Calvin Brown, is to, after the attack has been launched, will move Brown's division from where we were at 1 o'clock over to the exit area where the Forge Road leaves the Donelson perimeter, and will commit his men about between 8 and 11 o'clock. His other brigade, commanded by Baldwin, along with the troops commanded by Drake, the men commanded by men out of Floyd's division, commanded by McCausland and Wharton, will all be massed about a half a mile southwest on a ridge near the school that moves up and intersects the Winds Ferry Road and the Forge Road near Dudley's Hill. So the Confederates mass all their men except the Brown's brigade and the men left to hold the perimeter to throw against General McClellan. And by 8 o'clock, McClellan is getting into deep duty. They have routed MacArthur's brigade. They have forced the brigade commanded by they forced the 2nd Brigade to pull back and form at right angles to W.H.L. Wallace, and they have gained. So by noon or 1 o'clock, the Confederates do what this gentleman, who I know who he is, would be applauding. The Confederates are winning an overwhelming victory. And that's when Wallace has committed his troops, ignoring Grant's orders to hold his ground and not bring on attack, and moves to McClellan. Now, when Floyd has changed his mind several times, no one is worse of a commander than one that will adopt the words of the last person he talks to. Evidently, Pillow has a stronger personality and has decided they will return to the perimeter. They have beaten the enemy, not realizing that Grant isn't beaten, and they will then pick up the men in Fort Donelson, the water batteries and the artillery, and they'll all march out the Charlotte Road or the Forge Road. They've evacuated Donelson, they've given Grant a blow to the solar plexus, and they've become heroes. But because Grant is not beaten, he orders a counterattack, urged by Smith against Butler's former position. Easy job, because there are only less than 400 men of the 30th Tennessee, most of them armed with shotguns and flintlocks over where we were. They can't hold their ground, but they do get back early enough to keep the Federals from seizing that ridge where you take the road to go out to the water batteries. Wallace advances, but he doesn't regain all the ground McClernand did. So actually, both the Forge Road and the Charlotte Road are still open. Now, the only man that realizes that is Forrest. He realizes it because some of his men have been out there and they see what people are reporting as sentries and campfires are wounded Union soldiers occupying the camps of McClernand's right flank brigade and MacArthur's brigade. So the Confederates are going to meet. And they're going to meet and decide what we're going to do. Now, there have been 2 steamboats here early in the day. And the 2 steamboats have left here late on the day with about 400 to 500 wounded Confederates on their trip down the river to Clarksville and Nashville. The telegraph is still functioning from here to Nashville. And Pillow has sent his famous order that everything has gone with us today. But as they fall back and the Confederates have occupied, the Union have occupied those trenches where we were, have reached the area of the road going to the water batteries and pulled back, they're going to decide what we're going to do. So they're meeting. And it's going to be a rather acerbic meeting. The audio-visual in there catches the general tenor of it well. The reports have come in as they're debating what they're going to do. The reports have come in of these campfires, which when Forrest goes out to see them, are really wounded Union soldiers clustered around campfires, and the sentries are the Virginia armed fences. So as they're debating here, they're going to come to the decision making. Now, learning that the Butler will report, particularly from their position where we were before, the Union will attack in the morning, place cannons where they can enfilade the water batteries, and Fort Donelson will not be given up. So, if Fort Donelson is going to have to be given up, there are 2 options open to the Confederates. They cannot hold out any longer, and they can evacuate or surrender. Now, as they discuss the evacuation, Forrest would have been listening to the debate. So he will go in and bring back the report from Stovepipe Johnson. And Johnson is the one that comes in and says, those are really a fence out there. those are wounded people, and the road is not there. So they're back. That information comes in. That is going to decide Floyd. Now Floyd is going to decide that as they now move to the option, when they learn of the presence of those people on the Forge Road and near the Charlotte Road are Yankees, they believe, and Forrest is going out to check it. So he's going to be mad when he comes back. And Forrest has a rather vicious temper. And they will debate what we're going to do, and Buckner says, if they're there, we're going to have to surrender. Because when the artillery opens in the morning, we will be forced to evacuate the water batteries. Now, Floyd had been governor of Virginia, returns. He had been governor of Virginia during the Nat Turner Uprising in 1831. That was when Virginia only served 1 year, so he hasn't been governor of Virginia either 6 years or 12 years. He's been governor of Virginia 3 years and 3 terms. He had been Secretary of War in Buchanan's cabinet. Now, while he's Secretary of War, they have problems. They have problems with fraud, waste, and abuse, which is against the law, just like it is now on public officials. Now, what he's in trouble with is his son-in-law, named Clemson, for whom Clemson University is named, had been in charge of the Indian bonds for the sale of Indian lands, were in the custody of the Indian Bureau in the War Department, and there seems to be a problem that Thompson or somebody with him has used the bonds to support some private investments. So he's got some real problems there. And then there's a fake problem. Maybe it would be better for the Confederates if he'd done it. It's rumored in the North that he has overstocked the arsenals in the South with good weapons, and as a clue on what he's going to do. So that they make the mentions of him having certain problems when he discusses what he's going to do. And his position is that if we're going to surrender, I will be judged by my decision for my own welfare. I will not surrender. He also will get a commitment from Buckner. Can I take my Virginians out? The 4 Virginia regiments and 3 Virginia batteries here. Buckner says yes, provided you can get them out of here before we enter into surrender negotiations. Pillow will then come up with an argument. Well, if you're the most hated man in the South, I'm the second most hated man in the South. And he turns and says, speaking for myself, can I take my men out? Now, he's always going to take him and his staff. And Buckner again says, yes, provided you leave here before I enter negotiations. About this time, Forrest returns. And Forrest probably uses even stronger language than they quote, because he's going to say the Charlotte Road is open. And he says, I am going to take my command out. And if they will follow me, and any other people that want to join me can go out with me. Because I'm going out even if I take one man. And he stomps out of the meeting. He's a very physical, powerful, and a very a person you don't want to cross. So when he does that, they now, Floyd says, turn to Buckner and says, I'm going to pass the command. And he again repeats, can I take my command out? Again it is, yes, provided I'm not in negotiations. Pillow says the same. He says, since I'm the next in command, I'm going to pass it to Buckner. Provided I can get out of here. And he says, yes, again, provided you're out before I take command, enter negotiations. So they leave. So Buckner will then address his letter to Grant. They've been at West Point together for 3 years. All except Grant's final year. Grant's in the 43 class. Buckner's in the 42. They've been very friendly at West Point. Grant had floated a loan from Buckner in January 1854 when he's down and out and needs money to get back to St. Louis County. So he's going to write a memorandum that will inform General Grant that his assumed command that has been passed to him, and he's going to ask that in view of having the command yielded to him, the situation being very critical, he would like the appointment of commissioners to talk over terms for the possible surrender of General Grant, for the surrender of the garrison. So he calls for pencil paper and writes it, and he's going to send 2 people out. One is going to be Judge Chairs, who in the future will own Ripa Villa. Ripa Villa is on the field of Spring Hill, where the breakfast from hell took place on the morning of the 30th day of November. And where Cosby. They pass through the lines, they run into people from Smith's command. They'll then see him on to send the message with Cosby and Chairs on to Grant, and Grant gets the message. Meanwhile, the 2 transports have arrived. Aboard them are Confederate reinforcements. Some of you, I think this fellow here, relations would be in the 20th Mississippi. So they get off the steamboats. And Floyd requisitions the steamboats that are brought in the 20th Mississippi.
Awful.
So he's going to deploy them as a picket line to keep other Confederates from getting down to the land. So the boats are going to take 2 of the Virginia regiments across the river here and deposit them on that side. They'll come back over, Lloyd Floyd, the men from the 3 Virginia batteries who are leaving their cannons behind, and the 2 other Virginia regiments aboard one of the steamboats. And the guy, Colonel Brown, Major Brown of the 20th Mississippi, your commanding officer, says the last time, he's got to be padding the story. This last time he sees Floyd, he's on the stern of one of the 2 steamboats, waving his sword, telling, "Come on, my brave Virginians." He cannot be that crude as he goes over and leaves the Mississippians here. Pillow gets ferried across the river in a barge along with his staff. They'll join 2 Virginia regiments that have crossed early on the march to Clarksville. Now Buckner headquarters are here. So the first Yankees to arrive here is going to be Captain Dove of the ironclad Louisville, the only one that's left behind. He tries to coerce Floyd, Buckner into surrendering. Buckner, about that time, Lew Wallace shows up. Now, Lew Wallace and Buckner are good friends because in peacetime, Wallace had been an important figure in the militia up in Indiana. Buckner had been an important player in the State Guard in Kentucky, and they had known each other from militia rallies. So the first senior Union general to arrive here is General Lew Wallace. And he'll be here. And of course, Grant hadn't replied to this time. Buckner will reply and will remark, remembering that he's known Grant. He's loaned his money, loaned Grant money, and Grant's comments will, the only terms that will be accepted are unconditional surrender, or I move on your works immediately. Buckner sends a message back accepting them, describing them as rather ungenerous. Grant arrives, and they'll do a little reminiscing. As Grant arrives, they'll talk about better old times, and Wallace will enter into a discussion. The Confederates are better organized than we are. And he said, suggest to Grant that it might be well to use the Confederate officers to organize their men for the paroling and surrendering of public property, signing paroles, and then Grant turns to Earl Buckner and says, well, since the situation you're in, you might be short of funds, and I'm willing to lend you some money out of my personal accounts, and Buckner turns him down. So then the surrender has taken place, and the Confederates will assemble here, and here is where a number that's reported as 13,000 now would be left, will be embarked aboard vessels for the trip north, and of course a number of them, and as longer as my friend Jimmy says he's been here and talked to more people, a lot more people take a walk, like Simon Bolivar Buckner. As the Union don't have a very good picket line, walk through the Union lines and take up arms immediately again for the Confederates. The senior officers, company grade officers and staff, and Buckner will all get to go to Fort Warren in Boston Harbor, where they'll be paroled and exchanged in September 1862. The rank and file will be shipped north, most of them going to either Camp Morton or Indianapolis, Camp Douglas in Chicago, or Camp Chase in Columbus. A number of the junior officers will go up to Johnson Island and Sandusky Bay. All the Confederates will be exchanged and paroled in mid-September 1862, and will be back in arms. As we know, Buckner is back in arms in the field in time to negotiate a surrender in which he is a winner when they accept the surrender of Munfordville, Kentucky, when Bragg is going northward on the Kentucky campaign. So here you have the making of a legend. Now this is very important, the unconditional surrender. Now it's going to be very important to what happens in Germany in 1945. Because at Casablanca in January 1940, uh, 43. We've just landed in North Africa. And they're deciding what terms we're going to offer Germany. And Churchill chokes when Franklin D. Roosevelt remembers Fort Donelson. What does he remember about Fort Donelson? Unconditional surrender. So we will be demanding unconditional surrender. That means never being not all there and escapes assassination. Germans will fight to the bitter end. So you could argue Roosevelt's loose use of unconditional surrender are going to probably, from the cost, many thousands, and I might say hundreds of thousands of lives in late 1944 and 1945, because he's cut the ground underneath the people that are moderately anti-Hitler. The ground has been cut from under him on that term of unconditional surrender. Also, we'll make Grant a popular figure. Now, Grant will tell us later on that he only smoked an occasional cigar. But the press keeps talking about him smoking cigars here. And he gets large numbers of boxes of cigars and becomes a cigar smoker, primarily, not a cigarette smoker. Now, at the Battle of the Wilderness, when Grant is General-in-Chief, the 6th day of May is a crucial day in Grant's position of General-in-Chief. The Battle of the Wilderness could go any way on day 2, on the 6th. And it is at one time, looks like the Union Army is going to be badly beat. Now, Horace Porter, who's now on Grant's staff, is going to count the number of cigars, at least that Grant puts in his mouth and lights up. And I believe the figure is 28 cigars. That means he's very nervous. He's not smoking them to the butt or chewing them. And what does he die of? A very painful throat cancer. So that may have well sentenced him to his early death from cancer. So, one of the things that you can come out of this use of unconditional surrender, that is very important to soldiers, whether they're particularly British Empire soldiers and United States soldiers in that period from October 1942 till the first week of May 1945, because it has to be fought. Then unconditional surrender after the plot to assassinate Hitler and failed. So, any other questions?
Sure.
So this is very important.
I have a really simplistic one. From what I've understood, the Confederates weren't really outnumbered. So why is it they just didn't say, hey, this isn't going the way we thought, we're going to turn around and retake everything. They have no ships. Sure, it's another day. But they still had an army. Why didn't they do that?
I should have made another point. When the siege began, Grant arrives before Fort Donelson on the 20th. The Confederates outnumbered. But in the interim, between the 12th day of February and the 14th day of February, Grant receives 4 brigades of reinforcements. Lew Wallace marches over from Fort Henry, and 2 brigades arrive from Paducah. So by the time of the morning of the 15th, Grant's army is about 24,000 men.
the Confederates know that? Do they know he's been reinforced?
What's that?
Do they know he's been reinforced?
Yeah, it's two chicken generals.
Well, they knew that Smith, they knew that a large convoy had come up the Cumberland River on the afternoon of the 13th, in the evening of the 13th, when Foote arrives with the 3 ironclads that had gone back to Cairo. They knew there were a large number of transports with it. And they may have known that some of Wallace's men were here, because Wallace's men arrived on the 13th. Now, if the Confederates were good on recon and questioning prisoners, they might know, but they would have to know of the arrival of the 2 brigades on the night of the 13th, 14th. Because they would have seen them coming up the river.
They were also surrounded, basically. They had no place to go.
So the Confederates are partially surrounded. When the Confederates attack on the morning of the 15th, the Charlotte Road is still open. Now, when I say it's still open, Jimmy's done a lot more waiting than I have. The Charlotte Road at that time crossed further upstream than it does now. Probably about a quarter of a mile.
Or so, yeah.
He's come up with the good figures on where it is. So the Charlotte Road is still open. But the Charlotte Road is up to saddle skirts on horses. Now, a saddle skirt on a horse would be above where when the horse's belly starts to curve in again, where it drops down is where the saddle skirt is. It's where the blanket goes. So that would mean if you're a 5'2" Confederate, where is that going to be? That's going to be hitting him up here. To a Cove Confederate, it's going to hit him from the belt to the crotch. And the river, and it's 20 above zero. And where the water is swift, it's running. But if you step into the water, there's going to be a sheet of ice where there's no strong current. And one time out in Montana, I waded the Bighorn River. And it would be in the same situation where it gets shallower and there's no current, because ice will cut you just like a razor blade. As we were seeing pheasants flying across the other side, we figured a good hunting over there. His friend and I waded the Bighorn River. But we were too cold to hunt on it. We got the other side, and they said when you're cold and get cut by a razor, you have no feeling. I didn't know we were bleeding, my buddy and I, until they looked at each other and the blood was in our shoes. So ice, it doesn't cut deep like a razor, but it doesn't have to cut very deep to draw blood. So not only that's the depth of the water. The doctors probably don't realize how bad conditions are going to be. They don't realize that in the future winters of the war, these men are going to be used to that type of hardship. This is the first winter of the war, and the doctors do not think it's a good idea to move the men out the Charlotte Road with the water short skirt, as they say, saddle skirt deep. And also they have the problem of it's very muddy. So if Forrest had been in command, they would have tried to get out. But you've got 2 wimps in command. And it's gone too far when they pass the command to Buckner to reverse the 2 wimps' decision. And this man has the good fortune to meet the descendants of Floyd and Pillow.
It's just more or less a footnote as well as a question that you told a story this afternoon about how when Grant was a captain serving in Missouri, he hesitated to attack the Missouri unit, and because they skedaddled overnight. Well, one of the skedaddlers was Mark Twain.
Yes.
And there's a story, and of course we think of what would have happened had that attack occurred. All that literature that would have been lost, might have been lost, and not to mention, of course, Grant's own memoirs.
Yes, and also after the war, newspaper writers were as dumb as television interviewers today. So after Grant is dead, they're going to give a newspaper is going to interview Sherman. And you just think of Kitty Couric doing this interview. Who's a better general? You or General Grant, General Sherman? I can see her eyes on him. She's going to say, I'm smarter than General Grant. I know logistics better than he. I know about the great captains of history. He goes through everything he comes up with, why I'm better than Grant. Kitty's writing it all down. And then he's going to add up, but then he's going to say, and drop the bombshell. And this is the important thing on Grant. Grant doesn't worry what the enemy is doing. Not what he learned over there at Palmyra. He doesn't worry what he's going to be doing, what the enemy's doing, so he's not going to be concerned about attacking them. So he's learned that. Mark Twain is riding with him, he gets captured. Riding with the enemy, riding with the devil, and gets captured. So that's why Sherman ends up saying Grant's a better general after having Kitty Couric all enlightened of what she's going to have this scoop that Sherman crashes Grant.
The Virginia units that evacuated with Pillow and Floyd, what happened to them? Where did they go?
All right, they are, Floyd's command had only recently been transferred from southwest Virginia to Bowling Green. So Floyd's command goes back to southwest Virginia and does not participate in the Battle of Shiloh.
The overall responsibility for the Confederates is Albert Sidney Johnston, who was up at Bowling Green. This is my question. Couldn't he have gotten on that new railroad that went from Bowling Green to Clarksville, gotten on a train, got to Clarksville, taken a steamboat down here, visited the fort, and been back at Bowling Green in his own bed in one day?
Yes.
Never
So
came.
the press is going to turn on Johnson. He's going to be savage after this battle. But Davis' favorite general is not General Lee. Davis' favorite general, and it has been Davis' favorite ever since Davis was 10 years old. Davis' favorite when they're in Transylvania, when they're at West Point and in the Army. He remembers Johnson as being the handsomest soldier, the best soldier he's ever seen. So he will finally tell the press, if he is not a general, we do not have one. Therefore, we should make peace. Now, Johnson looks like he finally has found himself at Shiloh. He has overruled Beauregard when he announces on the evening of the 5th, when Beauregard wants to call off the attack, cut bait, and go back to Corinth, as the enemies are expecting. And Johnson ends up by saying, I would fight them if there were a million. So now he's, for the time, asserting himself. Then, after asserting himself and deciding they're going to fight the Battle of Shiloh, he then exposes himself too much on the battlefield at the wrong time and the wrong moment, and gets himself killed when the Confederates are apparently winning. And Beauregard will telegraph Johnson the president that evening and report they've won a great victory. General Johnson, unfortunately, has been killed, and we will complete our victory in the morning. And of course, Buell's men have arrived during the night. The Wallace has arrived during the night, and and no Confederate reinforcements arrive, and Grant will win the next day. So you'd have to think sorry on Davis. Same thing, you got to worry Davis after the first day of Stones River sends Davis a message. Greg, the president is in Chattanooga at that time, claims a great victory at Murfreesboro on the 1st, but unfortunately there's 2 more days. So I would be getting a little disillusioned if I was Davis.
We got a recurring theme here.
Yeah.
Okay, any
Confederates
other
in 2-day battles. Not a good mix.
Any other questions?
Got one over here.
There was another Confederate general wandering around, Bushrod Johnson. Talk a little bit about what
All right,
his
Bushrod Johnson.
decisions during the surrender period.
All right, he doesn't attend the meeting. He's the most junior of the generals.
And basically has no command.
And he's a little man that's not here, and he's very difficult to decide where he is. So after arranging to have his men sent off, he'll go for a stroll, and there's no Union soldiers guarding that one road. He walks on out and will command a brigade at the Battle of Shiloh. So he's not involved. He does not get taken. Now, Floyd will have a pain in his chest the next spring and die of a heart attack. So he never has a meaningful command again. Pillow gets a meaningful command in his head of the conscript bureau, where he's real good at that. He's a good bureaucrat, and he doesn't listen to any sob sisters when their husband or their boyfriend are getting conscripted. But he does command troops once again. During when Sherman is closing in on Atlanta, he leads a raid by Confederate cavalry on Lafayette, Georgia, and gets defeated in Lafayette, Georgia, along in late June. That's his last command in the war, outside of running the conscript bureau.
So he only really fought here and then in Georgia.
Who's that? Pillow?
Philip,
Yeah.
battle.
Any other questions?
Can you speak to Camp Douglas and what happened to the guys that went from here up there?
All right, what goes to them? The enlisted men under the Dix-Ill cartel of mid-July 1862, each side is going to parole all the prisoners they hold. The big block of Confederate prisoners are the Donelson prisoners. So they will be paroled and declared exchanged. They'll board steamboats, ride trains to Cairo, Illinois, and then board steamboats and be transported down the Mississippi River to Vicksburg, Mississippi. At Vicksburg, Mississippi, they will then be exchanged, declared exchanged. Now, most of the troops will be assigned to what will become the Army of Tennessee. One brigade of Tennesseans in the 7th Texas will be assigned to Pemberton's army at Vicksburg. That would be the Army. The brigade is commanded by General Gregg, having the 7th Texas, the 50th Tennessee, 51st Tennessee, 41st Tennessee will be with Johnston's army after when the Confederates were invested in Vicksburg. They will end up being in the Army of Tennessee eventually.
So because they're exchanged instead of paroled, they can go back into the battle.
As soon as they're exchanged, they can go back.
Right, but if they're later on when they're paroled, technically, they couldn't go back into the battle, and if they did, they were
If they're
prisoners
paroled but not exchanged, technically they cannot go back to military training.
Okay.
Were the conditions at Camp Douglas as bad as what we hear they are?
What?
Were the conditions at prison Camp Douglas as bad as what I've heard they are?
Well, the prison camps are either north or south, are not a place in where you go for a rest cure. I would say at Camp Douglas or Camp Morton, you'll probably die of a respiratory disease, not of a disease of the intestines. It will be very high. In fact, the highest death rate of any percentage-wise is Elmira, New York. So you have a better chance of dying at Elmira, New York than any other prison camp. But its numbers can't compare with the number in Andersonville, because Andersonville is 5 times larger number of guests than Elmira.
Now's a chance. Now's a chance.
I hate to ask, because I don't think I hear much about Maney. Did they just sort of just
All
sit
right,
there?
Maney's brigade. Maney's brigade is attached to Hyman's brigade. Maney's battery is attached to Hyman's brigade, which is principally from Tennessee and Alabama. They're attacked on the 13th day of December. They will not be seriously involved in the fighting on the 15th. They're covered by the
So probably by ancestors wounded on the 13th.
Yes, they're probably removed on the 13th.
When Floyd and Pillow pulled back into the fort, and we're talking about leaving the next day, they were going to take the Seacoast
Pillow's
guns.
plan is they've beaten the Union so bad, they're going to come in and pick up their knapsacks and haversacks, refill their cartridge boxes, be joined by the 49th, 50th, and the 30th Tennessee, be joined by the guys manning the water batteries and the artillery units, and march out the Forge Road and the Charlotte Road, and by way of Charlotte, and report to General Johnston at Nashville.
But they would have been leaving the guns themselves. Or
They would leave the big guns behind.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, see you all tomorrow.
Let's give Ed a round of applause.